The envelope landed on my kitchen table with a heavy thud. My hands trembled as I tore it open, and when I read the first line, my world shattered. Vera Thornhill, you are hereby sued for $300 million. The signature at the bottom wasn't from a stranger. It was from Nathaniel, my son, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, the child I'd raised alone after his father died. But the worst part. As I flipped through the pages, I saw another name. Claudette Mercer Thornhill, his new wife. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just a lawsuit. This was a calculated execution. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I want to know how far it has reached. 48 hours earlier, I was standing in my small garden, watering the tomatoes I'd planted last spring. The morning sun felt warm on my face, and I remember thinking how peaceful everything seemed. My phone rang. It was Ruby, my 16-year-old granddaughter, Nate's daughter from his first marriage to sweet Penelope, who died in that terrible accident 5 years ago. Grandma Vera, her voice cracked. Dad's lawyer just called. He said you need to move out of your house. He said it belongs to the company now, and she couldn't finish. She was sobbing. I stood there, the garden hose still running, water pooling around my feet, feeling like the ground was opening up beneath me. Ruby, honey, where are you right now? I'm at school, but Grandma, Dad said I can't live with you anymore. Claudette said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She said you're a thief, that you stole from their company. My blood ran cold. The company, Thornhill Pharma, the pharmaceutical company that I'd built from nothing, that I'd poured my life savings into, that I'd sacrificed 30 years of nursing wages for, the company that was supposed to be our family's legacy. And now they were calling me a thief. I hung up the phone and walked into my house. This wasn't the mansion where Nate and Claudette lived in Riverside Oaks. This was the same modest 3-bedroom home I'd bought 35 years ago when my husband Gregory was still alive. The mortgage was paid off with my own sweat. The furniture was old but cared for. The walls were covered with photos. Nate as a baby, Nate at his college graduation, Nate and Penelope on their wedding day, Ruby as a newborn. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet. Behind my winter coats, there was a small safe. My hands shook as I dialed the combination. Inside was a metal box, and inside that box was the truth. Documents, letters, bank statements, loan papers, and one envelope marked, "Original filing, do not destroy." I pulled out a letter Nate had written me 12 years ago, when the company was just starting. My eyes filled with tears as I read his handwriting. Mum, I know I can never repay you for everything you've given up for me. Every dollar you've invested, every night you worked double shifts, every sacrifice. I see it all. This company will be our legacy together. I promise you, when we make it big, you'll never worry about money again. You'll retire in comfort, and I'll take care of you the way you took care of me. I love you. Your son, Nate. Sitting there on my bed, holding that letter, I felt something break inside me. But it wasn't my spirit. It was my last shred of doubt. The boy who wrote those words was gone, and in his place was a man I no longer recognized. The next morning, the lawsuit was delivered. $300 million. They claimed I had interfered with company operations, that I had defamed Claudette to business partners, that I was mentally unfit to serve on the board. But the cruelest accusation was buried on page 7. The initial investment of $180,000 provided by Vera Thornhill was a gift to her son, not an equity purchase, and therefore grants her no ownership rights. A gift. They were calling my life savings a gift. I thought back to those early days. The year was 2011. Gregory, my husband, had just died from a rare autoimmune disease. The medical bills had devastated us, but I'd managed to save $180,000 from my nursing salary over the years. Nate was 29, brilliant, full of ideas. He'd been working in pharmaceutical research and had a vision: create affordable medication for rare diseases, the kind that had killed his father. "Mum," he'd said, sitting at this very kitchen table, "I can make this work, but I need capital. I need someone who believes in me." I believed in him. Of course I believed in him. He was my son. I took out a second mortgage on this house, $75,000. I cashed out my retirement fund, $50,000. I sold Gregory's vintage motorcycle collection that he'd spent 20 years building, $40,000. I worked triple shifts at Mercy General Hospital, sometimes 36 hours straight, to fund the research and development. For 5 years, I poured every cent I had into Thornhill Pharma. The early days were brutal. Nate and I worked out of a rented office space barely bigger than a closet. I'd finish my nursing shift at 7 a.m., then go straight to the office to handle the administrative work: payroll, vendor negotiations, FDA paperwork. I learned pharmaceutical regulation law from library books. I negotiated with manufacturers in broken phone calls at 2 a.m. When we couldn't afford to hire a receptionist, I answered the phones. When we couldn't afford a cleaning service, I mopped the floors. There were nights Nate would fall asleep at his lab desk, and I'd cover him with my coat, then keep working on the financial projections. There were days we ate nothing but ramen noodles, because every dollar had to go back into the company. I remember one winter when the heat got shut off in our office because we couldn't pay the bill, and Nate and I worked in our coats, our breath visible in the cold air, refusing to give up. But we made it. In 2016, we got our first major breakthrough: a medication for juvenile arthritis that was 60% cheaper than the market alternative. By 2018, we had 3 drugs in production. By 2021, Thornhill Pharma was valued at $300 million. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was watching my son slip away from me. It started small. Nate began missing our weekly dinners. Then he stopped returning my calls. When I'd show up at the office, his assistant, hired by Claudette, would tell me he was in meetings. Board meetings that I, as a co-founder, wasn't informed about. Strategic decisions made without my input. The first time I met Claudette was at the company's 10th anniversary party. She walked in wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly mortgage, her arm linked through Nate's. She was beautiful, polished, and her smile never reached her eyes. "So you're the famous Vera," she'd said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Nate has told me so much about you, about how you helped out in the early days." Helped out. As if I'd brought them coffee, not built the entire foundation. Over the next 2 years, I watched Claudette systematically erase me from my own company. She convinced Nate to hire an executive board of her friends from her previous job at Magnus Pharmaceuticals, a company later investigated for price gouging. She pushed for aggressive pricing strategies that went against everything Nate and I had built the company for. When I objected in board meetings, she'd smile and say, "Vera, honey, maybe you should let the business professionals handle this." The final straw came 6 months ago. I discovered that Claudette had been in secret negotiations to sell Thornhill Pharma to Hexagon Industries, a massive conglomerate known for buying small pharmaceutical companies, jacking up drug prices by 400%, and laying off all the original staff. I confronted Nate in his office. "Is this true? Are you selling to Hexagon?" He wouldn't look at me. "Mum, it's complicated. Claudette thinks—" "I don't care what Claudette thinks." My voice rose, something that rarely happened. "We built this company to help people, not to make her rich." That's when his face changed, cold, distant. "You need to understand something, Mum. Times have changed. Your ideas about affordable medication are outdated, naive. Claudette has connections, experience, vision. Maybe it's time you stepped back." Stepped back? I felt like I'd been slapped. "Nate, I own 49% of this company. I have a right—" "Actually," he interrupted, pulling out a folder. "We've been looking into the original filing. There might have been some irregularities. My lawyers think your stake might not be as solid as you believe." I left his office in a daze. Irregularities. Lawyers. These were words I never thought I'd hear from my son. Now, sitting in my kitchen with the lawsuit in front of me, I understood. This wasn't about business. This was about erasing me completely, taking everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed, and pretending I'd never existed. My phone rang. It was Wesley Kingsley, an old friend from my nursing days who'd gone on to become a lawyer. He'd retired 5 years ago after a distinguished career, but we'd stayed in touch. "Vera, I heard." His gruff voice came through. "Your son is suing you?" "Wesley, I don't know what to do. They're saying my investment was a gift. They're trying to take my house. Ruby called me crying." "Stop," he interrupted. "Listen to me. Do you have documentation? Original agreements? Anything?" I looked at the metal box on my table. Everything. I kept everything. There was a pause. "Then get it together and bring it to my office. I'm coming out of retirement. Nobody does this to you, Vera. Nobody." That afternoon, I drove to Wesley's office with my box of documents. The receptionist looked surprised to see him there. Apparently, he'd cleared his schedule and come in specifically for me. We spread everything out on his conference table. Bank statements showing my $180,000 investment, the second mortgage papers, the sale documents for Gregory's motorcycle collection, payroll records showing I'd worked without salary for the first 3 years, instead ploughing my nursing income back into the company. Email chains where Nate repeatedly called me co-founder and partner. But the most important document was at the bottom, the original company filing from 2011, signed by both Nate and me. Wesley's eyes widened as he read it. "Vera, this says you own 51%, not 49%. I nodded. There was a clerical error when we refiled in 2014 for the Series A funding. Nate said he'd fix it, that it was just paperwork. I trusted him. Wesley's jaw tightened. He never fixed it. He let the 49% stand on all subsequent documents, knowing you had no idea. "Vera, this is fraud. Your son committed fraud against you." The words hung in the air. Fraud. My son. The boy I'd raised. The man I'd sacrificed everything for. "There's more," Wesley continued, pulling out his laptop. "I did some research on Claudette Mercer. Her maiden name was Claudette Voss. She worked at Magnus Pharmaceuticals until she was quietly let go 3 years ago. No official reason given, but I have a contact there. He said there were allegations of corporate espionage, stealing proprietary information to sell to competitors." My hands went cold. "She's done this before." "I think so. And I think she targeted your son specifically. Thornhill Farmer was a rising star. Young widower, vulnerable after losing his wife, sitting on a potential gold mine. She saw an opportunity." I thought of Ruby, my granddaughter, caught in the middle of this. Wesley, they're trying to take Ruby away from me. Nate said she can't live with me anymore. His expression darkened. Over my dead body. We're filing a countersuit today, and we're going to need help. That help came in the form of Damien Cross, a private investigator Wesley had worked with for years. Damien was in his early 40s, ex-military, with a reputation for uncovering things people desperately wanted to stay hidden. "Mrs. Thornhill," he said, shaking my hand in Wesley's office. "I'm going to be very direct. If Claudette has a history of this kind of behavior, there will be evidence. People like her leave trails. I need your permission to dig into everything. Her finances, her communications, her past relationships." "You have it," I said without hesitation. Over the next 3 weeks, my life became a strange double existence. During the day, I continued working my nursing shifts at Mercy General, caring for patients, pretending everything was normal. At night, I met with Wesley and Damien, building our case. Ruby came to live with me officially after I filed an emergency custody petition. The night she moved in, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "Grandma, I heard what they're saying about you. I know it's all lies. I remember when I was little, how you and Dad used to work together. You were a team. He loved you so much." Her voice broke. What happened to him? I held her, this beautiful girl who looked so much like her mother, and I didn't have an answer. What happened to people when money entered the equation, when ambition eclipsed gratitude, when a manipulative woman whispered poison in their ear night after night? The discoveries came one by one, each more damning than the last. Damien found that Claudette had been in contact with Hexagon Industries for over a year, long before Nate ever mentioned selling. The emails were explicit. "Once I secure full control of Thornhill, we can move forward with the acquisition. The old woman won't be a problem much longer." The old woman. That's what she called me. Wesley uncovered shell companies in Claudette's name. She'd been systematically siphoning money from Thornhill farmers' accounts. Small amounts at first, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, but it added up to over 800,000. Money that should have gone to research and development, to keeping drug prices low, to the mission Gregory and I had dreamed of. But the worst discovery came from a deep dive into Claudette's past. Damien found her ex-husband, a man named Porter Voss, living in Oregon. He agreed to talk. "She did the same thing to me," Porter said over video call, his face haggard. "I owned a small tech company. She came in as a consultant, made herself indispensable, married me, then slowly turned me against my own partners. By the time I realized what was happening, she'd gotten me to sign away controlling interest. 6 months after our divorce, she sold the company to a competitor and walked away with $12 million. I got nothing." "Did you try to fight it?" Wesley asked. Porter laughed bitterly. "With what money? She'd drained my accounts, hired the best lawyers in the state. By the time I could afford representation, it was too late. Everything was legal, technically. She's smart. She makes you destroy yourself." After the call ended, I sat in silence. This was a pattern, a predator's pattern, and my son had fallen right into her trap. "We need to tell Nate," I said quietly. "He needs to know what she is." Wesley shook his head. "He won't believe it. She's spent 2 years conditioning him to distrust you, to see you as the enemy. If we approach him now, he'll just tell her, and she'll destroy evidence or disappear." "Then what do we do?" "We prepare for war," Wesley said grimly. "The hearing is in 2 weeks. We present everything in court, where he'll have to hear it, where it will be public record. We expose her in a way she can't spin or escape. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I continued working, continued caring for Ruby, continued pretending I wasn't about to lose everything I'd spent 68 years building, my life's work, my relationship with my son, my home, my legacy. Ruby helped me go through old photo albums one night. We found pictures of Nate as a little boy, grinning gap-toothed in his baseball uniform. Nate at his high school graduation, hugging me, his face full of pride. Nate and Penelope's wedding, where he'd insisted I stand with him during the ceremony because, "You're not just giving me away, Mom. You've been both my parents." "He was good once," Ruby whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I remember when Mom was alive. He was different. After she died, he was sad for so long. Then Claudette came, and at first she seemed to make him happy again. But then, it was like she replaced everything Mom was. Every photo of Mom came down. Every tradition we had disappeared. It wasn't grief healing. It was erasure." I held my granddaughter and wondered how deep Claudette's psychological manipulation had gone. Had she deliberately targeted Nate at his most vulnerable? Had she studied his weaknesses, his grief, his desperate need to feel successful after losing Penelope? Was my son a victim too, or had he become a willing participant in his own moral corruption? 3 days before the hearing, Damien called with one final piece of evidence. "I found something," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Claudette has a storage unit across town. I got access. Legally, don't worry. Inside are boxes of documents from Magnus Pharmaceuticals, proprietary research, drug formulas, patient trial data, all stolen. Vera, if she's planning to sell Thornhill to Hexagon, she might be planning to use your company's research as a bargaining chip, along with stolen data from her previous employer. This isn't just corporate espionage, it's potentially criminal. Can we use this in court?" "Absolutely. I've already contacted the FBI. They're investigating. But for your hearing, this shows a pattern of fraudulent behavior that directly impacts your case." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd fed Nate as a baby, where we'd celebrated his college acceptance, where he'd told me about his dream of starting a pharmaceutical company. The room was full of ghosts, memories of a relationship that had once been full of love and trust. I pulled out the letter Nate had written me 12 years ago and read it again. "You'll never worry about money again. I'll take care of you the way you took care of me." Had he meant it when he wrote it? Or had it always been manipulation, a way to keep me invested, keep me working, keep me sacrificing until he didn't need me anymore? Ruby found me there at 2 a.m., tears streaming down my face. "Grandma," she whispered, sitting next to me, "whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You're my hero. And no matter what Dad says, no matter what that court decides, I know the truth. You built everything. You sacrificed everything. And nobody can take that truth away." I hugged her, this wise, beautiful girl, and I found the strength to face what was coming. The morning of the hearing arrived with grey skies and the threat of rain. Wesley picked me up at 7 a.m. in his old sedan. I wore my best dress, a simple navy blue one I'd bought for Ruby's school awards ceremony last year. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make me look like I was putting on airs. The courthouse was in downtown, an imposing stone building that had stood for over 100 years. As we walked up the steps, I saw Nate's car pull up, a sleek black Mercedes that cost more than I'd earned in 5 years of nursing. Claudette emerged first, wearing a cream-coloured designer suit, her hair perfectly styled. then Nate, in an expensive Italian suit, looking like a stranger. Behind them was Maxwell Pemberton, their lawyer, a shark in a $5,000 suit with a reputation for destroying opponents. He'd made his career defending corporate raiders and white-collar criminals. Claudette saw me and smiled. It was a smile of pure confidence, of someone who knew they held all the cards. She whispered something to Nate, and he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Contempt. My son looked at me with contempt. Wesley's hand gripped my elbow, steadying me. Don't react. Save it for inside. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-panelled, with the seal of the state hanging behind the judge's bench. We took our seats on the left side. Nate, Claudette, and Maxwell sat on the right. The distance between us was maybe 15 feet, but it felt like an ocean. The bailiff called, "All rise!" The Honourable Judge Iris Carmichael presiding. The judge entered, and my heart stopped. I knew her. Judge Iris Carmichael had been Iris Montgomery when I'd met her 30 years ago at Mercy General. She'd been a young public defender then, brought to the ER after a car accident. I'd been her night nurse for a week. We'd talked for hours during those long night shifts, about justice, about the law, about her dreams of becoming a judge who actually cared about truth, not just procedure. We'd lost touch over the years, but I'd followed her career from a distance. She'd become exactly what she'd dreamed of, a respected judge known for her fairness and her refusal to be swayed by expensive lawyers. She looked at me, and for just a moment, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. Then it was gone, replaced by professional neutrality. "Please be seated," she said. "We're here for the matter of Thornhill vs. Thornhill. Mr. Pemberton, you may present your opening statement." Maxwell stood, his voice smooth and confident. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. My client, Nathaniel Thornhill, is the founder and CEO of Thornhill Pharma, a company he built from the ground up through his expertise, his innovation, and his tireless work. His mother, Vera Thornhill, provided a small gift in the early days, $180,000, to help her son get started. But over the years, Mrs. Thornhill has become increasingly difficult, interfering with company operations, making baseless accusations against my client's wife, and attempting to exert control she has no legal right to. The company's official documentation shows she owns 49% at most, and we contend that even that stake is questionable, given the nature of her initial contribution. We're seeking damages for defamation, interference, and emotional distress, totaling $300 million. The number echoed in the courtroom. $300 million. An impossible sum designed to annihilate me completely. Judge Carmichael nodded. "Mr. Kingsley, your response?" Wesley stood, and when he spoke, his voice was like thunder. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a business dispute. What we have here is one of the most egregious cases of fraud, manipulation, and betrayal I've encountered in 40 years of practicing law. Vera Thornhill didn't give her son $180,000. She invested everything she had, her life savings, her home, her retirement, 30 years of back-breaking work, to build Thornhill Pharma from literally nothing. The original documentation, which we will present, shows she owns 51% of the company, not 49%. Her son, influenced by a woman with a documented history of corporate espionage and fraud, has systematically attempted to erase his mother's contributions, steal her life's work, and discard her like trash. We will prove that this lawsuit is not just baseless, it's criminal." The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. I saw Nate glance nervously at Claudette. She maintained her calm smile, but her fingers were gripping her purse tightly. Maxwell smirked. Your Honor, my opposing counsel is engaging in wild speculation and character assassination. We have documentation, as do we, Wesley interrupted. Extensive documentation, and I suggest we let the evidence speak for itself. Judge Carmichael's eyes were sharp. Very well, Mr. Pemberton, present your case. For the next 2 hours, I sat through a nightmare. Maxwell presented the company's official records showing my 49% stake. He presented board meeting minutes where I'd allegedly been difficult and combative. He called a company CFO, one of Claudette's hires, who testified that I'd been erratic and confused in recent meetings, implying I was senile. Then Claudette took the stand. She spoke with perfect composure, her voice soft and sympathetic. Your Honor, I love my husband dearly, and I've tried so hard to have a good relationship with Vera, but she's never accepted me. From the first day we met, she made it clear I wasn't good enough. She's made terrible accusations, saying I'm stealing from the company, that I'm manipulating Nate. It's been heartbreaking. I only wanted to help Nathaniel build on the foundation his mother started. But she's fought us every step of the way. I watched her performance, and I understood why Porter had lost everything. She was believable, sympathetic, the perfect victim. Then Nate took the stand. My son, my baby, the boy I'd raised alone after Gregory died. He wouldn't look at me. Mr. Thornhill, Maxwell said gently, tell us about your relationship with your mother. Nate's voice was quiet. I love my mother. I always have. But in recent years, she's changed. She's become paranoid, accusatory. She's made horrible claims about my wife, disrupted board meetings, threatened to sabotage the company. I tried to be patient, to understand that maybe age was a factor, but it reached a point where I had to protect my family and my business. The $180,000 she gave me when I was starting out. I've always been grateful for that gift, but it was a gift. She's trying to claim ownership of something she didn't build. Didn't build? The words escaped my lips before I could stop them. Judge Carmichael looked at me sharply. Mrs. Thornhill, you'll have your turn to speak. Wesley squeezed my hand under the table. Not yet, he whispered. Trust me. By lunchtime, I felt like I was drowning. Every piece of evidence they presented painted me as a delusional old woman trying to steal from her successful son. The gallery behind us, mostly reporters and court observers, were murmuring. I could feel their judgment. During the recess, Ruby found me in the hallway. She'd skipped school to be there. Grandma, they're lying. All of them. How can Dad say those things? How can he just lie like that? I didn't have an answer. I just held her and tried not to break down completely. At 2 p.m., court resumed. Judge Carmichael looked at Wesley. Mr. Kingsley, present your case. Wesley stood, and I saw the old fire in his eyes, the legendary lawyer who'd never lost a case he believed in. Your Honor, I'd like to start with a document. He approached the bench and handed Judge Carmichael a piece of paper. She read it, and her eyebrows rose. This is the original company filing from 2011, Wesley said, his voice carrying through the courtroom. Signed by both Vera Thornhill and Nathaniel Thornhill. It clearly states that Vera owns 51% of Thornhill Pharma, not 49%. The 49% figure appears in later documents due to what Mr. Nathaniel Thornhill claimed at the time was a clerical error he promised to fix. He never did. Instead, he used his mother's trust against her, allowing the false percentage to stand while she continued to pour her life into the company. Maxwell jumped up. Your Honor, that document, if it's even authentic, is irrelevant. Later filings supersede. Later filings procured through fraud don't supersede anything, Wesley shot back. And we can prove it's authentic. We have the original notary stamp, the filing receipt, and testimony from the clerk who processed it. Judge Carmichael studied the document carefully. Continue, Mr. Kingsley. I'd like to call Vera Thornhill to the stand. My legs shook as I walked to the witness box. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the easiest oath I'd ever taken because truth was all I had left. Wesley approached me gently. Mrs. Thornhill, can you tell us about the founding of Thornhill Pharma? I took a deep breath and began to speak. I told them about Gregory's death, about Nate's dream, about the $180,000 I'd saved over 20 years of nursing, about the second mortgage, the retirement fund, Gregory's motorcycle collection, about working triple shifts and going days without sleep, about mopping floors at 2 a.m. because we couldn't afford a cleaning service, about negotiating with manufacturers in the middle of the night, about learning pharmaceutical law from library books. For 5 years, I said, my voice steady, I earned nothing from the company. Every dollar I made nursing, I put back into Thornhill Pharma. My son and I were partners. We were building something beautiful together, a company that would make medication affordable, that would help people the way we couldn't help Gregory. It was never about money. It was about purpose. And when did things change? Wesley asked. When Claudette arrived. I looked directly at her. At first, I tried to welcome her. I'd lost my daughter-in-law Penelope in that car accident, and I knew Nate needed someone. But Claudette didn't want to be part of our family. She wanted to replace it. She immediately began pushing me out, cancelling meetings I was supposed to attend, making decisions without me, hiring her own people to fill the board. And she changed Nate. My son, who used to call me every day, who valued my opinion, suddenly stopped speaking to me, stopped including me, started looking at me like I was a problem to be solved. My voice broke. I've asked myself 1,000 times what I did wrong, how I lost my son. And the only answer I have is that I trusted him. I believed that the love between a mother and child was stronger than greed, stronger than manipulation. I was wrong. Maxwell stood for cross-examination, his voice sharp. Mrs. Thornhill, isn't it true that you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure and anxiety? Yes, from the stress of being systematically erased from my own company. Isn't it possible that your memory of these events is confused? My memory is perfect, Mr. Pemberton. I remember every sacrifice, every broken promise, every betrayal. You've made serious accusations against Mrs. Claudette Thornhill. Can you prove any of them? Wesley stood. We can. Your Honor, I'd like to call our next witness, Damien Cross, private investigator. Damien took the stand and methodically destroyed Claudette's facade. He presented evidence of the shell companies, the siphoned funds, the stolen research from Magnus Pharmaceuticals. He showed email communications between Claudette and Hexagon Industries, discussing the sale of Thornhill Pharma and dividing the profits, emails that never mentioned Vera's stake. But the most damning evidence was the video testimony from Porter Voss, Claudette's ex-husband. Porter's face appeared on the courtroom screen, and he told his story, how Claudette had done the exact same thing to him, infiltrated his company, isolated him from his partners, manipulated him into signing away his rights, then sold everything out from under him. She's a predator, Porter said, his voice heavy with regret. She finds vulnerable men with valuable assets and systematically destroys them. I tried to warn people afterward. But who listens to a bitter ex-husband? I'm just grateful someone finally has proof. I watched Nate's face as Porter spoke. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. He glanced at Claudette, who was whispering urgently to Maxwell. Wesley presented financial records showing the $800,000 Claudette had stolen. He presented her background check, revealing she'd been fired from Magnus Pharmaceuticals under suspicious circumstances. He presented testimony from 3 other companies she'd worked for, all of which had reported irregularities after her departure. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The courtroom was absolutely silent, except for Wesley's steady voice presenting fact after fact, document after document. Finally, Wesley said, "Your Honor, I have one more piece of evidence, a letter written by Nathaniel Thornhill to his mother 12 years ago." He handed me the letter, and I held it with trembling hands. "Mrs. Thornhill, would you please read this aloud?" I looked at the letter, at Nate's handwriting from a time when he still loved me, and I began to read. "Dear Mom, I know I can never repay you for everything you've given up for me. Every dollar you've invested, every night you worked double shifts, every sacrifice, I see it all. This company will be our legacy together. I promise you, when we make it big, you'll never worry about money again. You'll retire in comfort, and I'll take care of you the way you took care of me. I love you. Your son, Nate." My voice broke on the last words. When I looked up, I saw tears on Ruby's face. I saw Judge Carmichael's expression, stern but compassionate, and I saw Nate. He was crying. For the first time in 2 years, my son was crying, really crying, his face buried in his hands. Claudette grabbed his arm, whispering harshly in his ear, but he shook her off. Judge Carmichael's voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Nathaniel Thornhill, stand up." Nate stood, wiping his face, his expensive suit now wrinkled and stained with tears. "Did you write this letter?" the judge asked. "Yes," Nate whispered. "And did you mean it?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, I used to." "You used to?" Judge Carmichael's voice was ice. "You used to love your mother? You used to be grateful for her sacrifices? What changed, Mr. Thornhill?" Nate looked at Claudette, then at me, and I saw the moment, the exact moment, when the spell broke. "I don't know," he said, his voice hollow. "I don't know what happened to me." Maxwell tried to intervene. "Your Honor, my client is under tremendous stress." "Your client," Judge Carmichael interrupted, "is about to hear my ruling, and so is everyone else in this courtroom." She stood, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "I've been a judge for 20 years, she began, "and I've seen a lot of cases. But I have never seen anything quite as morally repugnant as what I've witnessed today. Mrs. Vera Thornhill invested everything, and I mean everything, into building a company with her son, her life savings, her home, her health, her time. She worked herself to exhaustion to create something meaningful, something that would help people. And in return, her son, influenced by a woman with a documented history of fraud, attempted to erase her completely." She turned to Nate. "Mr. Thornhill, you stood in this courtroom and called your mother's investment a gift. You testified that she didn't build the company. You looked me in the eye and lied. The evidence shows beyond any doubt that your mother owns 51% of Thornhill Pharma, according to the original filing, which has never been legally superseded. The clerical error you claim to have discovered was in fact fraud. Fraud you committed against your own mother." Nate was white as a sheet. Judge Carmichael continued, "Mrs. Claudette Thornhill, the evidence against you is substantial. Corporate espionage, embezzlement, fraud. These are criminal matters. I'm referring this case to the FBI and the District Attorney's Office. Bailiff, Place Mrs. Claudette Thornhill under arrest. The courtroom erupted. Claudette screamed as two officers approached her. This is insane! You can't do this! Nate, do something! But Nate just stood there, frozen, watching as his wife was handcuffed. As for the lawsuit, Judge Carmichael said, raising her voice over the chaos, it is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm issuing an order for a complete audit of Thornhill Farmers' finances. Any funds stolen by Claudette Thornhill are to be returned immediately. The company's ownership structure is to be corrected to reflect the original filing. Vera Thornhill, 51%, Nathaniel Thornhill, 49%. And Mr. Thornhill, you should count yourself lucky that I'm not charging you as an accessory to your wife's crimes. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. In the chaos that followed, reporters shouting questions, Claudette being led away screaming, Maxwell gathering his papers in defeat, I just sat there, unable to move. Wesley put his hand on my shoulder. You won, Vera. You won everything. But I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt hollow. Ruby ran to me, throwing her arms around me. Grandma, it's over. You're safe. We're safe. I held her, this beautiful girl, and I let myself cry. Not tears of victory, but tears of grief for what had been lost. Then I heard a voice. Broken. Desperate. Mum? I looked up. Nate was standing there, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. His face was ravaged, his eyes red. Mum, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know how I let this happen. I don't know who I became. Every instinct in me wanted to reach out to him, to comfort him the way I had when he was a child, but I couldn't. Not yet. You called my life savings a gift, I said quietly. You looked at me with contempt. You tried to take everything from me, including Ruby. You became someone I don't recognize. I know. His voice broke. I know. Claudette, she got into my head after Penelope died. I was so lost, and she seemed to understand. But then, slowly, everything changed. She isolated me from everyone, from you especially. She convinced me you were the problem, that you were holding me back. I believed her. God help me. I believed her over you. Why? It was the question that had tormented me for 2 years. Why did it work? Why was I so easy to discard? Nate's face crumpled. Because I was weak. Because after Penelope died, I was angry at the world, and Claudette gave me someone to blame. She made me feel powerful, successful, important, and she made me feel like you made me feel small by comparison. It was a lie. All of it was a lie. But I was too far gone to see it. I stood up, and for the first time, I looked at my son not with a mother's unconditional love, but with clear, hard judgment. You're 42 years old, Nathaniel, old enough to take responsibility for your choices. Claudette may have manipulated you, but you let her. You chose to believe her lies over 30 years of my love. You chose ambition over integrity. You chose to become someone who could sue his own mother for $300 million. Those were your choices. I know, he whispered, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right, if you'll let me. I didn't answer. I took Ruby's hand and walked out of the courtroom, leaving my son standing there alone. The aftermath came in waves. The FBI investigation into Claudette revealed far more than we'd initially discovered. She'd been running a scheme for over a decade, targeting vulnerable men in the pharmaceutical and tech industries. Thornhill Pharma was going to be her biggest score yet. She'd planned to marry Nate, gain his trust, isolate him from me, take control of the company, sell it to Hexagon for $300 million, then divorce Nate and disappear with her share. The stolen research from Magnus Pharmaceuticals was worth millions. The embezzled funds from Thornhill Pharma totaled over $800,000. Her shell companies revealed connections to organized crime, money laundering schemes that dwarfed the corporate espionage. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. At the sentencing, she never showed remorse, only rage that her plan had failed. Maxwell Pemberton was disbarred for knowingly presenting false evidence and colluding with a client engaged in criminal activity. Thornhill Pharma underwent a complete restructuring. I took my rightful place as majority owner and board chair. The first thing I did was cancel the sale to Hexagon. The second was to fire everyone Claudette had hired and bring in people who actually cared about our mission: affordable medication, ethical practices, helping people. The company's value grew, not because we focused on profit, but because we returned to our principles. Within a year, we were worth $400 million and growing. As for Nate, it took me 6 months to speak to him again. 6 months to process the pain, the betrayal, the loss of trust that might never fully return. Ruby was the bridge between us. She loved her father despite everything, and she helped him see the depth of what he'd done. He didn't make excuses. He entered therapy, real therapy, not the corporate coaching Claudette had insisted on. He worked on understanding how he'd been manipulated, yes, but also on taking responsibility for his own moral failures. One Sunday afternoon, a year after the trial, he came to my house. Not the mansion in Riverside Oaks. He'd sold that and moved to a modest apartment. He looked different. Thinner, older, humbler. "Mum," he said, standing on my doorstep like a stranger asking for permission to enter. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I've spent this year trying to become the person you raised me to be, the person I was before I lost my way. I resigned from the company. I know I don't deserve to be there after what I did. But I'm working as a researcher again, doing the actual science, helping develop new medications. It's what I loved before everything became about money and power." I looked at him, and I saw glimpses of the boy I'd raised. But I also saw a man who had to live with his choices. "You hurt me in ways I didn't think were possible," I said. "You made me question everything, my worth as a mother, as a person. You tried to destroy me." "I know. I'm sorry. I'll be sorry for the rest of my life." "Sorry isn't enough, Nate. Sorry is just words. What matters is who you are now, who you choose to be going forward." He nodded. "I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying." I didn't invite him in that day, but I didn't close the door entirely either. "Ruby's doing well?" I said. "She got straight A's this semester. She wants to study medicine." "She told me. She wants to be like you. Not like me. Better than me. Stronger than me." "That's not possible, Mom. You're the strongest person I've ever known." I looked at my son, and for the first time in 2 years, I saw genuine remorse, genuine understanding of what he'd lost. "Come back next week," I said. "Sunday afternoon. We'll have dinner. Just the 3 of us. You, me, and Ruby. No promises beyond that. But it's a start." His eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance. I'm not doing it for you, Nate. I'm doing it for Ruby. She needs her father. And I'm doing it for me, because I need to believe that people can change, that love can survive even the worst betrayals. But you need to understand, trust is earned. And it's going to take a very long time. Today, 2 years after that trial, things are different. Nate works for Thornhill Pharma again, but not as an executive, as a senior researcher, reporting to a board he's no longer part of. He's proven himself slowly, painfully, through consistent actions rather than words. Ruby is thriving. She's 18 now, heading to college in the fall to study biochemistry. She wants to continue our family's real legacy, helping people, making medicine accessible, using science for good rather than profit. I'm 70 years old. I still work 3 days a week at Mercy General because nursing is who I am, not just what I do. The rest of the time, I run Thornhill Pharma with the help of a brilliant team who share our mission. The company is now worth over $500 million, but more importantly, we've helped millions of people afford medications that would have bankrupted them. We've stayed true to Gregory's memory, to the dream Nate and I once shared. Sometimes, on Sunday afternoons, we have dinner together, me, Nate, and Ruby. The conversations are easier now, lighter. There's laughter. But there's also a scar that will never fully heal. Nate knows it. I know it. We're building something new on the foundation of something that was broken. People ask me if I've forgiven him. The truth is, I don't know. Some days I have. Some days the anger comes back. The memory of sitting in that courtroom listening to him call my sacrifice a gift. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a one-time decision. It's a choice you make every day, sometimes every hour. But I know this. I didn't fight that battle just to save a company. I fought it to save my sense of self, my dignity, my truth. I fought it so that Ruby would grow up knowing that justice matters, that truth matters, that fighting for what's right matters, even when the whole world seems to be against you. Judge Iris Carmichael retired last year. At her retirement party, she pulled me aside. "Vera," she said, "I want you to know something. 30 years ago, when I was in your hospital room recovering from that accident, you told me something I never forgot. You said, 'The law exists to protect the weak from the strong, the honest from the corrupt.' If you become a judge, never forget that." I never did. Your case reminded me why I took this job in the first place. I hugged her. This woman who had been a young, idealistic public defender when I'd known her, who had become a judge who actually cared about justice. "You gave me my life back," I said. "You saw the truth when everyone else saw a crazy old woman." "I saw a mother who refused to be erased," she replied. "The world needs more people like you, Vera." As I sit here now, in the same kitchen where this nightmare began 2 years ago, I think about what I've learned, about trust and betrayal, about love and manipulation, about the price of ambition and the value of integrity. I learned that the people who are supposed to love you most can hurt you deepest. But I also learned that you're stronger than you think, that truth is a weapon more powerful than money or influence, and that fighting for what's right, even when it costs you everything, is the only way to live with yourself. I learned that family isn't just blood, it's choice. Ruby chose me. Wesley chose to fight for me. Damien chose to uncover the truth. They were my real family when my own son tried to destroy me. Most importantly, I learned that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself, by the standards you refuse to compromise, by the truth you refuse to deny, even when it would be easier to look away. The story you've just heard is based on real events, though names and details have been changed to protect those involved. But the truth remains. There are mothers out there right now being told their sacrifices don't matter, that their love was never enough, that they're problems to be discarded. If you're one of those mothers, I want you to know, your worth isn't measured by your children's gratitude. Your sacrifices matter whether or not they're acknowledged. Your truth matters even when everyone calls you a liar. Fight for yourself. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Seek help. And never ever let anyone convince you that your love and sacrifice were just gifts that earned you nothing, because they're trying to erase you. Don't let them. I'm genuinely curious. If you were in my position, what would you have done? Would you have fought, or would you have walked away? Would you have been able to forgive your child, or would the betrayal be too deep? Let me know in the comments. Every story shared is a light for someone else walking through darkness. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I assure you they will surprise you. Thank you for staying until the end.